Mowgli was real. And no, he wasn't a cartoon. His real name was Dina Sanichar, and he was found deep inside a cave in the heart of the Indian jungle, living among wolves. He walked on all fours, growled instead of speaking, and fed only on raw meat. But unlike the cheerful story Disney sold us, returning to the world of humans was not his salvation. It was the beginning of his hell. They tied him up like a beast, displayed him as a curiosity for tourists, and called him the Wild Boy. Behind that colorful, innocent version we all remember, two much darker stories are hidden. One of the real child who was torn away from his pack, and another of Rudyard Kipling himself, the author who left traces of his own childhood trauma scattered through the pages of his book. His memories were carved so deep that years later, in the basement of the house where he grew up, someone found a single word scratched into the wall: help. And you might ask yourself, why now? Why has the truth about what really happened to Mowgli finally come to light? Because, more than a century later, a 5-year-old girl has begun to speak about it in impossible detail. She describes place, names, and scenes that exist only in forgotten historical archives. So tell me, how can a child who only just learned to read recall things that happened long before she was born? The story begins in a small village in northern India, near Uttar Pradesh, the same region where Sanichar was discovered in 1867. There lives an ordinary family, a mother, a father, and their little girl, Anaya. She's 50 years old, cheerful yet strangely quiet. From the moment she learned to speak, she began saying things no one understood. Her games were never about dolls or fairy tales. They were filled with wolves, tigers, caves, and fire. When asked where those ideas came from, she would simply reply, "I was there." At first, her parents dismissed it as imagination. After all, children invent worlds all the time, don't they? But soon, her games turned into nightmares. Anaya began waking up at midnight, screaming moms, Baloo, Akela, Bagheera, names that might sound familiar from the Disney movie, yet neither of her parents had ever mentioned them. How could she possibly know them? And why did she call out those names with such desperation? As if she were remembering a past no one had told her about. One night, her mother decided to record her while she slept. What she captured was so disturbing that she still refuses to watch the video again. The girl sat up in bed, eyes closed, murmuring in a strange tongue. The words were guttural, fast, carrying a rhythm that sounded like ancient Hindi blended with animal sounds. When her parents showed the footage to a local teacher, he claimed he recognized some of the words jungli, jungle, agni, fire, bacha, child. They were terms from the 19th century used in the Thisol, very dialect of the region where Dina Sanichar had once been found. But the most unsettling part wasn't the language. It was her tone. She didn't sound like a little girl dreaming. She sounded like someone pleading for her life. "Don't burn them. They won't let me go." What could that mean? Was it just coincidence, or the voice of something that had returned to tell the story no one wanted to hear? Alarmed, her parents sought help from a child psychologist. The sessions were recorded. In one of them, Anaya drew a scene: a cave, a group of animals, and a human figure surrounded by flames. Then, with her shaky little hand, she wrote a word she had never been taught: help. That single word was enough to send chills through every adult in the room, because it was the same word found carved into the basement wall of Kipling's childhood home, the place where he is believed to have endured the abuse that scarred his life forever. Coincidence? Or was something, somehow, repeating the same cry through another body, another lifetime? As the psychologist dug deeper, the girl began speaking of the jungle, as if she had walked through it herself. She described rivers with precision, temples wrapped in roots, and trees marked with symbols which, she said, were the wolves' signs. One of her drawings showed a haunting scene: a panther watching from the shadows, a tiger with its tail on fire, and a child running between the trees. When the psychologist asked who that child was, Anaya replied in a voice that didn't sound like her own. "It was me." That sentence was recorded on audio. Investigators replayed it countless times. The tone was deeper, almost impossible for a child so small. From that moment, the story stopped being a mere clinical case and became a mystery. When researchers compared Anaya's drawings and descriptions with old maps and documents, they made a chilling discovery. The landscape she spoke of matched exactly the area where the orphanage that housed Dina Sanichar once stood. Even the smallest details, the layout of the trees, the texture of the cave walls, the sounds of the forest, were perfectly accurate. How could she know all that? How could she remember? The story soon began to draw attention from local journalists. One of them, a reporter who specialized in paranormal phenomena, was the first to connect the girl's strange testimonies with the century-old records of the wolf boy. In his notes, he described how Anaya's body moved during her trances, on all fours, tense, fast, almost animal-like, in the exact same way the medical reports had once described Dina Sanichar. But there was something else, something far more disturbing. In her accounts, the girl kept speaking of the man of fire. She said this man had torn her away from her wolf family, that he had killed them, and later locked her inside a cage. When asked how she knew all this, Anaya gave an answer that left everyone speechless. "Because I saw him when he would fight." Could a memory from another life truly manifest itself through the eyes of a child? Or are there memories that the soul refuses to forget, even when it changes bodies? As the days went by, the nights grew stranger. Her parents said that sometimes in the middle of the night, Anaya would rise from bed, walk to the window, and start howling toward the moon. And each time, the dogs in the neighborhood would answer her, as if they recognized the sound. Her terrified mother tried to stop her, but the girl cried, insisting that they were calling her, and that if she didn't answer, they would come back for her. Scientists, desperate to explain it, suggested every possible theory: parasomnia, implanted memories, media influence. But none could explain how a 5-year-old child could know ancient words, forgotten places, and dates that no modern book contained. One night, as her father tried to calm her, Anaya whispered something else, words that froze his blood. "Baloo didn't come back. Bagheera told me to run, but the fire had already begun." That statement matched precisely the moment in Kipling's original tales when Mowgli leaves the jungle, terrified of the flames. Coincidence? Or confession? By then, the story had gone viral. The media called her the girl who remembers Mowgli's life. Some branded her a liar. Others saw her as proof of the supernatural. But almost no one noticed one crucial detail. Anaya had never seen the Disney movie. Her parents were strict about what she watched. She didn't even know the name Mowgli until reporters mentioned it. And yet, she described the orphanage where Sanichar had spent his final years with surgical precision. "The walls were cold," she said. "It smelled like smoke and soap. There was a mayor with a cross around his neck who taught me to drink water from a cup." Every detail matched the missionary records of her Hart Lewis, the orphanage director. How could that be? How could a 5-year-old girl know about documents hidden away for more than a century? Perhaps it wasn't a coincidence at all. Perhaps Disney, unknowingly, hadn't adapted a fantasy, but echoed something real. Perhaps the story of Mowgli never truly ended. Perhaps it simply changed bodies. Months passed, and investigators continued to dig deeper. They examined old colonial maps and mission archives until they stumbled upon something that made their skin crawl. Anaya's descriptions of the Singing River and the Council Stone matched an actual rock formation in a region that, according to 19th century records, was known as wolf territory. That very stone, as described in missionary writings from the era, had served as a meeting place for the packs. Could it be the very council rock that Kipling described in his book? No one had ever made that connection until a 5-year-old girl mentioned it without hesitation. Each new coincidence was like another piece of a puzzle no one knew existed, and in every session, Anaya remembered more: the heavy rains, the thunder rolling over the jungle, the smell of wet earth, the roar of a tiger. She said she could still hear the footsteps of Shere Khan. When the psychologist asked if she was afraid, the girl answered with eerie calm, "No, because I already know how it ends." That was when the story took a turn. A professor of comparative literature, an expert on Kipling, traveled from Bombay to meet the girl in person. He brought with him a rare 1894 edition of The Jungle Book. He handed it to her and asked if anything in it felt familiar. Anaya turned the pages slowly until she stopped at an illustration: a boy and a panther, staring out across the jungle from atop a rock. Without hesitation, she said, "This is where Bagheera lived." The professor froze. That name, Bagheera, wasn't written anywhere on that page. It wasn't in the caption. It wasn't translated. There was no way she could have known. Yet she said it naturally, as if naming an old friend. The scholar wrote down every word, every gesture, his pulse racing. And when the girl finally closed the book, she whispered something soft, almost to herself. But he remembered too. Who was she talking about? Could she have meant Kipling himself? Could a soul leave marks so deep that another, more than a century later, could recognize them? The coincidences had become impossible to ignore. In Kipling's personal journals, there were recurring dreams of a cave, of fire, of wolves, and of a lost child. In a letter to a friend, he wrote, "The jungle haunts me in dreams, with eyes that are not my own." What if those weren't just metaphors? What if Kipling, without realizing it, had been channeling someone else's memories, perhaps Sanichar's, to write his story? The thought became even more unsettling when Anaya began drawing strange symbols on the walls of her bedroom. Geometric figures, markings identical to the ones Kipling had scribbled in his notebooks during his years in India. According to a semiotics expert, those symbols represented transitions of identity, passages from one being to another, as if someone were trying to describe what it feels like to cross the threshold between bodies. Could that be what was really happening? Soon, the country's media gave it a name: the Sanichar effect. Television shows, magazine articles, and documentaries tried to explain the phenomenon. Some called it possession. Others said it was the result of a highly suggestible mind. But the facts refused to fit into any rational box. One news channel aired a recording that shook the nation. During a light hypnotic state, Anaya began writing with her left hand, using a script she had never learned: classical Urdu, the language of 19th century India. Her handwriting was smooth, confident, and fluid. When experts translated the text, they found a single chilling sentence: "They burned my home." The world was divided. Was this just an extraordinary child with impossible knowledge, or proof that the soul of the wild boy had truly returned, not for vengeance, but for truth? In time, those recordings reached Europe. A team of British researchers traveled to India to cross-check Anaya's descriptions with Kipling's private records. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. In his youth, before The Jungle Book was written, Kipling had mentioned in his diary a visit to the orphanage of Earhart Lewis, where Sanichar had lived out his last years. In those yellowed pages, Kipling wrote about seeing a man who had once been a wolf and the loneliest eyes in the world. Which means Kipling met Sanichar in person. That forgotten visit, buried in the dust of time, might have been the spark that gave birth to the legend. And now, more than a century later, a little girl was remembering that same life, down to the smallest detail. Could it be that the soul of the wild child had been reborn and returned now, for reasons we can't yet understand? Unable to comprehend what was happening, the psychologist arranged one final session. She prepared a controlled environment, cameras rolling, observers silent. As Anaya's breathing slowed, the therapist asked her to go back, as far back as she could remember. The child closed her eyes. Her heartbeat quickened. Her fingers curled like claws. She said she could smell wet earth. She said she could hear her wolf mother calling her from far away. "Don't leave me, Raksha," she whispered. The experts in the room froze. They knew that name. In Kipling's story, Raksha was the wolf who adopted Mowgli. But no one had ever mentioned that name around Anaya. Then she screamed. A deep, primal scream that made the walls tremble. When she came to, her first words were, "I'm not him anymore, but I'm still me." After that night, everything changed. Anaya stopped having episodes. Months passed in calm silence. She seemed lighter, happier, almost free. But one evening, as the family sat down for dinner, her father noticed her staring into the flame of a candle. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, as if she were seeing something beyond this world. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "They've learned nothing. Fire is still their toy." No one knew what to say. Later that night, she asked her mother for a notebook. She wrote a single sentence in large, trembling letters. "Don't forget, the red flower destroys." By morning, the notebook lay open on the kitchen table. Around the sentence were drawings of wolves. Neither parent remembered teaching her how to draw them, yet each stroke was precise, almost anatomically perfect. Was it a warning, a message, or the last echo of a memory fading away? A year later, the family moved to Delhi. The episodes had stopped, but the memories remained. One afternoon, while watching a news report about forest fires, Anaya broke down crying uncontrollably. Through tears, she said, "The jungle is screaming." At her young age, her words carried a weight that didn't belong to a child. "No one understands what fire does when you see it from the inside," she repeated over and over. The parents kept her away from the media, but the phenomenon kept drawing researchers. One of them, a skeptical anthropologist, spent weeks interviewing her. At the end of his study, he wrote a single line in his report. I asked her what she remembered about her first death. She looked at me with tenderness, as if she felt sorry for me. The last known recording of Anaya happened during a thunderstorm. Lightning flashed through her room as she woke suddenly. The camera installed in the corner captured everything. She said softly, "Now I understand why I came back. It wasn't to remember. It was to forgive." She paused, looked straight into the lens and added, "I was the boy Disney turned into a story." But no one ever told what happened after. The recording ends with a long silence, broken only by the rumble of thunder. The next morning, her parents said she had slept peacefully, for the first time in years. Was that the moment her soul finally found rest? Or simply the end of a memory that had fulfilled its purpose? Today, the Anaya case remains an enigma that refuses to fade. Some call it coincidence, others call it psychological anomaly. But there are those who feel it's something deeper, something that brushes the edge of the spiritual and the impossible. After her story became public, more and more cases began to surface. Children speaking languages they had never heard, adults describing places that existed only in ancient archives, dreams that foretold tragedies before they happened. Coincidence? Or signs that the memory of the soul exists, watching us quietly from somewhere beyond time? And as you listen to this, maybe you too feel it. A flash of something familiar, a face, a sound, an image you can't explain. A dream that repeats, a place you've never been, but somehow remember. What if it isn't imagination? Every year, more testimonies appear, more voices, more fragments of impossible memory. Children who speak extinct languages, adults who dream of forgotten worlds, dreams that cross the border between the living and the remembered. Can we still call it coincidence? Or are we standing before something science has yet to measure? The memory of the soul, reincarnation, the echoes of time. Call it what you will, the pattern is there. Silent, constant, waiting for someone brave enough to look without fear. And if right now, as you hear this, an image crossed your mind, a face, a sound, a scene with no clear origin, ask yourself, what if it wasn't imagination? Maybe that's why some souls return, not to haunt, but to remind us that pain doesn't vanish, that stories don't truly end, that lives can return wearing new skins. Perhaps you too carry an ancient story within you, one that is yours and not yours at the same time. And if you've ever felt it, a voice, a whisper, something that speaks to you from another time, don't ignore it. Write it down. Tell it. Because every story like this is a piece of a greater truth, one that's been waiting, century after century, for someone to listen. Year after year, the testimonies repeat. The secrets resurface. Maybe we still don't understand, and maybe we're not meant to. But something in this world insists on coming back. And as long as it does, I'll be here to tell you about it. So if you liked this story, subscribe. And remember, the next time you hear an impossible story, don't dismiss it. Maybe, just maybe, it's the past trying to speak to you again.